to think about a proper balance between needed support for big, well-established, endowed institutions, flagship, iconic kinds of institutions. I mean, we can name the Cleveland institutions. We don't have to name any of them. We all know exactly who we're talking about. And leaving ample resource to support, you know, her notion is let 1,000 flowers bloom. And even if they're only, you know, they're not perennial, but they're annuals, there still is a beautiful garden that can be created by helping those kinds of organizations, even if their life trajectory is not necessarily long. But by supporting a robust community that supports startups, wind downs, folks coming into the field when there's a vacuum, there's a richer cultural life. I think the answer to the question, you have to consider two types of foundations. So an organization that is a grant-making organization that constantly is out continuing to raise funds to build corpus with new pour-over money, the downturn may not have looked quite as severe because there was new money coming in that might have filled some of the hole that the downturn of portfolio value gave to them. And so their rebound may not look as big a bounce, or it might be even larger because they've got more corpus. And then there are others that are basically living on their investments and trying to manage the investments so that they can rise in principal value so that they can at least keep up with the cost of inflation and their grant-making power. And in perpetuity kind of portfolio perspective. I would say by and large, most endowed institutions have recovered substantially from 2008. Depending on the mixture of the types of investments, some may have recovered more and some may have recovered less. But there's a general bounce back. Now there's a big concern about whether the record high of the various indexes and markets can hold and sustain in economic downturns with political risk and all the other kinds of things that move markets. And so there's a worry that, we shouldn't get too giddy about everything continuing to go up, but we may have to live with flat markets or bits of decline. But there's general optimism. And I think most of the folks that have looked at the markets that I've listened to are saying that we can expect modest growth, not the same kind of record growth that we experienced in 2013 and late 2012, but more modest growth patterns, but still growing. I would suggest a letter. At this point, with the era of email and phone calls, something that's written that gets stamped in is probably the thing that sort of rises to the top. Some of us are old enough to remember at least our parents or grandparents talking about the telegram is coming, and when you got a telegram, everybody paid attention, or it's long distance. The telephone call came from someplace else. And so what mode of communication we choose to try to stand out and kind of rise up in importance, I think is now as important as ever. And so a lot of us probably get 200-300 emails a day, and the phone calls, if you're away for a day or two, you've got like 30 calls that you have to return. And so how to somehow distinguish yourself within that pack is kind of tough. So somebody sent a letter of inquiry that my assistant said, whoa, I got this letter. It was like the only letter in a bunch of magazines and stuff, and because everybody's doing email today. So suddenly that letter of inquiry, whoa, it pops. It's got my attention. I don't know if that's really quite responsive, but I would think try to figure out the mode of how you think you're going to get sorted out to get the attention. The other thing is that depending on the nature of the foundation and the high volume of the practice, don't think anything about calling back a couple of times. And I know that it's kind of don't stand on ceremony. Be persistent. And don't, we have the return phone calls in 24-hour rule is a practice we try to work on, but sometimes things fall through the cracks. Don't let that stop you. To hear about analytics of, I consider him a young demographer, he might be 40 already, but Richie Piprinen, Rust Belt anthology, he blogs a fair amount. I am so excited that this demographer has identified a new pattern of migration and growth in Tremont, Ohio City, and downtown, and that he has found flows of population coming into Cleveland that are both from other communities where the 2 or 3 years that he analyzed in this recent analysis, which are fairly recent years, between Chicago and Cleveland, we actually had more Chicagoans come here than we had Clevelanders going there. And we had at least a couple of the boroughs where we had more New Yorkers coming here and more Pittsburghers coming here than going there. And so there was this really hopeful trend. But the thing that really gets me excited is that among millennials, suburbanites from places like Mentor and Geauga County and the first ring suburbs are coming back to the core. And it's probably a trend that you're also seeing in Lakewood. I find that very heartening and very exciting, around which I'm asking a lot of my grantees, Downtown Cleveland Alliance, Cleveland Neighborhood Partnership, to collaborate, to think about strategies on how to make this potentially fragile but real movement sticky, so that once we've got them, they feel like they don't have to go anywhere.